Archbishop Justin, 5 days ago a fire broke up in Grenfell Tower, not very far away from where you live. How were you able to console people after such a tragedy?
I think the way you approach that as the church is that everyone is involved. So personally, the amount I can do is obviously limited as one person. So I went up on the next evening. I went and spent time with Bishop Graham Tomlin, who's here for this conference. And we spent time talking to fire officers, to the police, to the victims, to the survivors, those who'd been affected. But the local church, led by Bishop Graham, just poured into the area. And they opened all the churches, and they brought in blankets, and people gave, all kinds of people, Christians, non-Christians, gave huge amounts of goods, and people flocked in. And I think the people were just, the victims were surrounded by the love of the community. There have been problems with how some of the official channels responded, but the community, and it was led by the church. The church was the glue in many ways that held some of that response together, and that sense of being loved does not diminish the grief, but it does help people. It does bring a level of comfort, consolation in a way.
In what way is this typical for the role you envision for the Church of England in British society?
Well, I think it's a fairly classic response to the way the Church of England has existed, certainly over the last long period, certainly since the Second World War and long before that. We have a parish system where everyone in England is in a parish. And the parish is, when you're a parish priest, your ministry is to everyone in the parish, not just the people who come to church or who are registered as Anglicans. So the church has always been not only the Church of England, but the church with England and the church for England. And I think what we've seen in the last few weeks with a series of terrorist incidents and of catastrophe has been a renewing of that sense. So this morning, after the attack on the mosque in London last night, you know, the local bishop was in the mosque this morning with those affected, reassuring them by his presence, reassuring them, showing them we care about them, and we will go on working very much on that.
You just mentioned the attack on the mosque at Finsbury Park. What can religious communities and churches do to act against extremism and violence?
It's a very, very good question, that. I don't think there's a simple answer. If there was, we'd be doing it. I think there are a couple of things. First of all, we have to take responsibility as Christians for the action of those who call themselves Christians. We don't know what happened, and legally I can't comment on Finsbury Park. It's contrary to English law. But I can say that we need to be clear that any attack on, at the moment, a Muslim or a Muslim center is an attack on all of us. That it is as serious as an attack on Christians or on anyone. These are acts that are absolutely unacceptable. And as Christian leaders, we must take responsibility and condemn the violence, and if it has any connection with Christians, root it out of our tradition and our history with great determination.
Now you're here in Fribourg for a conference about the Holy Spirit. Why did you choose to attend this conference?
Well, why did I attend it? I attended it because various people met me 2 years ago. And, you know, like we put things in our diaries when they're a long way away and it looks very interesting. It is very interesting, but it's come at a very crowded time. But I think it was looking at the subject, the importance of the subject of who is the Holy Spirit? How do we discern the working of the Spirit? What serious theological work are we doing on understanding the action of the Holy Spirit in the world and in the church and in creation. These are areas of such colossal importance. And the quality of the speakers like Tom Wright, Cardinal Schönbrunn, Graham Tomlin, and others is of such a high level that I felt I could learn a lot by coming here.
Earlier in your life, you worked as a manager in the oil industry. Nowadays, many people blame big corporations, big banks for many of the problems that we have in the world. What are your thoughts on, well, basically the economy?
Well, I think there's been a big change since I was in the industry. There were a lot of people very concerned about the environment and climate change, even in the 70s and 80s. But that change has now turned to very much greater action. So for instance, within the financial world, many large investors, including led by the churches actually in many cases, are now disinvesting from very carbon-intensive industries like coal. At the same time, the economy we're seeing much more investment in renewables. A few months ago, about a month ago I think it was, for the first time in history, more than half of all electricity in a day was produced in the UK from renewables. It happened to be a sunny day, so it won't happen very often. But I think what we're seeing in the economy is people are beginning, no, more than beginning. I think it is now, by the vast majority, accepted that climate change is a huge threat, a massive economic cost, and any company that is not acting responsibly is not only being irresponsible with the climate, they're being irresponsible with their shareholders, their employees, and their future. And that is changing things quite quickly.
Well, you need to move on, so thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you very much for giving me your time.